Ire were were ni taucho. Ire were were.
Hello and welcome to Conversations with Mother Earth, brought to you by Grounded Press. My name is Dana Petrovic, and each week my guests and I explore one aspect of Mother Earth and the gifts that she gives us. We also discuss why these gifts are so precious and why we should value them. We got you curious? Good. We love curiosity. Let's begin. Dear listeners and viewers, should you be hearing this episode of Conversations with Mother Earth from anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere, then soon you will possibly be treated with your first frigid winter frost. And if you are in the Southern Hemisphere, then perhaps you are already starting to feel the scorching rays from the summer sun higher in the sky. In either case, you will want to seek shelter indoors, in the comfort of your home. However, home is not only a place where we shelter from the weather. It is also a place where our memories, be they joyful or unhappy moments, are shared and sheltered with our loved ones. Above all, home is ideally a place where we feel safe. Yet, as we discussed a few episodes back in our conversation with the courageous war refugee and young activist Muhammad Najam, over 80 million of our fellow human citizens do not have a home, thus denying so many of their basic need, human need, and what ought to be a human right, to be a shelter, to have a shelter, protection, and a sense of dignity. My guest today is Kria Djoyoadhiningrat, sorry Kria, who is an architect and leads a foundation called Slumfighters International, based in the Netherlands and operating across the world. My husband and I met Kria 10 years back in the Netherlands and have been following his work ever since. Kria, very welcome to Conversations with Mother Earth, and sorry that I mispronounced your last name.
No, I think you did it great, and thanks for the introduction, and nice to be here.
Kria, Slumfighters International has the goal to eradicate slums worldwide, a very ambitious goal. Tell us about your work and the countries in which you operate.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and yeah, first of all, it might be a little bit strange to be based in the Netherlands, and I was always thinking about why, because our goal is to yeah, we have quite a complicated goal. We want to help people living in slums to get a better living, and yeah, on the one hand, you have to yeah, help their technical needs, let's say. Yeah? So you mentioned shelter against the cold. Well, it's getting cold here in the Netherlands, or a shade against the heat. But that's only part of the process. With my background as an architect, I have a keen understanding of how to realize this. But in most cases, what's very important is the status. Is it formal or informal? And to help people overcome that barrier, that's quite a complicated negotiation process. And we conducted research in cities like Dakar and Kigali, also in Nairobi and Sao Paulo, to find out what we could do. And yeah, already before the COVID crisis entered, it was quite a struggle for different reasons. Yeah, so you have to deal with existing inhabitants, but also the municipality. You also have people who are still looking for a place to live, as you mentioned, with the homeless people. I hope the number is as low as you mentioned. It could be more, right? It's very hard, especially.
Those are war refugees. Those are just displaced ones. These are not the ones that are voluntarily seeking jobs in cities.
Yeah, yeah, true. And it's very hard to keep track because the status is unclear, and when nobody feels responsible because they are not registered or don't have an official belonging, let's say, that's difficult. And what we try to do with Slumfighters is to engage first of all, and to listen, and to look and to try to understand what's going on, and then to find a way to get to some kind of win-win situation. Because in the end, and that's what we believe, it's better when we are together than when we are apart and fighting amongst each other and blaming, and that's what's happening too much and too often.
Yes, unfortunately it does. Yes, and you mentioned this with municipalities and other places. You probably encounter all sorts of hurdles along the way, obstacles, bureaucratic ones, or different agendas, going in different directions.
Yes, and that's just on the surface. What it doesn't matter where you go. Even in the Netherlands, we have let's say a rich history of slums. Like 100 years ago, half of the Dutch population was still living in slums, and people forget about it. And that was one of the few upsides of, let's say, the Second World War, that we really had to rebuild. And that was a time when a lot of improvement was made. And the last slums, for example, in Amsterdam, were only renovated or renewed in the 70s of the last century. So that's 1970 something.
That's ironic. That's ironic that there's a colonial power and a rich country had slums for such a long time, isn't it?
Yes, but I think what's really at the core of things, when you don't consider your own population as a whole, but you see yourself sitting at the top, it's comfortable. And if you don't really care who is there at the bottom, who could use your help, well, then you get this situation of slums. I think it's a result very similar to why do we still have homeless people in a country like the Netherlands? That's also very similar. We still have homeless people today.
Yeah, that's true. This just from our listeners and for me, this might be a naive question, but generally, let us go at the core of the problem. Or how do slums get into existence in the first place? How does it occur that they grow and grow, and that they start and then they grow and grow and grow?
Yeah, usually it starts usually with it can be a small lead. For example, in Sao Paulo, we are in contact with this community of Paraisópolis, and it literally translates to the Paradise City. But it started when they started building a big stadium there. Of course, Sao Paulo has many stadiums. They love to play football and love to watch it. And because it's such a big project, people are invited to come and work there by the hundreds, right? And instead of just going in and out, commuting, they start to set up camp close by. And at that time, this was really like farmland. It was not really densely built yet. So people would find a place and would even start by asking somebody, can we set up camp here, right? And that's how it starts, usually with some informal agreement, and they say, okay, sure, go ahead. But people settle, and then more people arrive and say, hey, is there still some place? Okay, yeah, you can stay in my backyard and set up camp there. And years pass by, and slowly but surely it grows into a really very similar city as we have, for example, in the historic centers of European cities. And so I think it's one one part is there's opportunity, and there are people who are getting into it, but there is a lack of understanding and willingness of, let's say, a government to incorporate it. They just don't care. So that's where it gets separated, because I think the opportunity and the also the proactive way of people taking care of themselves is something that should be applauded and should be supported, but it is not. It's not.
You mentioned Kria a moment ago, and I said this to you in the introduction. You're educated as an architect. From your perspective, tell us, what does the concept of home mean to us humans?
Yeah, that's a deep one, I think. I mean, it's much more than just food and shelter.
Yes.
I think in short, you can say home is where the heart is. Yeah, home is where you feel at home. And yeah, although it doesn't really add in meaning in saying it in words, we all have a sense of what home is. And yeah, it's a very personal thing in the end. I was really thinking about it when you sent me the question before, and I'm still pondering about it, because it can be very physical, like having beautiful room arrangements, having pleasant daylight filtering in your home, familiar smells. But it can be also completely independent of the physical and depend completely on the people you're with. And when I was thinking about this, I imagined, I mean, we have a very, very nice home. I live together with my wife and my 2 daughters. But would it still be a nice home when they wouldn't be there, right? I was also imagining this. So it's really and, because, well, it's really nice that we are there, we are safe, we have a place where we can put our belongings, and we can recognize our memories in certain artifacts that we collected. So it's really the combination of all. And it can also be a little bit sad because, well, there are people even in rich countries who never feel at home, or they maybe feel at home somewhere else. They feel more at home at work, or they feel at home when they are with their friends sailing on a boat. I don't know. So home is a very personal thing, and that it made me also realize and reminded me that in order to make a home for somebody else, you really have to imagine standing in someone's shoes and understanding what makes somebody tick, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. This is the part of the process that you have to go through as an architect. You can't just be creative. It's not like a painter. You can't just draw a house. You have to, as you said, you have to create a home for somebody else. That's the responsibility of an architect.
Right, and it's also not just a matter of like, say, the technical challenge, right? A couple of years ago, I designed a single-family home for people I was introduced to on the other side of my hometown in Utrecht, and they expressed the desire to build it completely in massive wood construction. And I never did it before, but I took on a challenge. And well, of course, that is an interesting challenge, but at the same time, yeah, I needed to know who are they, and also who do they want to be. And you have to be able to win somebody's trust enough that, you know, well, they had 2 kids at that moment, but I needed to know basically if they had any family wishes, even before maybe their most trusted family members would know. And also small things like the youngest one was afraid at night, so the 2 bedrooms of the kids were not separated, but we took into account that it could be separated in the future. And it's these fine finesses that really make the difference that you can make as an architect, from making sure that the kids can sleep at night to making sure the building stays standing up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, standing up is one of the things that doesn't happen for much of the time here in China, which kind of there's a story to this, and this is one of the reasons why I selected architecture as a topic for conversations with Mother Earth, of what we experienced, my husband and I, here in Shenzhen, we were walking on a beach, and it was a spectacular sight. Of this, the landscape, it was spectacular. But the beach, on the beach itself, there were scattered remnants of houses, bricks, pieces of wall plaster, ceramic tiles, and sometimes even broken pieces of wood that were once somebody's furniture. And it made me feel despondent, I have to admit. I reflected that, these discarded fragments once sheltered a family's laughter, hopes and dreams. They came together, they had a beautiful moment. Children were felt loved behind these walls. And now these leftovers were cuddled by the waves of the South China Sea. Kria, what are your thoughts on how homes and even entire neighborhoods can so quickly become ruins, debris?
Well, first of all, yeah, it makes me humble, yeah, to realize that we are here on this planet and basically we're dust in the wind. Yeah. And I think it's also maybe partly a cultural thing. I grew up in the Netherlands, but yeah, of course, my parents are from Indonesia, and I think in Asia there's also a different connotation to let's say durability or sustainability. In Europe, we tend to try to fix things set in stone, while, for example, on some islands in Indonesia, they would like build a temple from local wood taken from the forest, and they would do that every year, and then they will ceremoniously burn it down even. But the act of repeating it over and over again and do it in such a way that it can be renewed, yeah, that's also a way of persisting. But yeah, your experience of walking down the beach and seeing the remnants of a house, of a place where people had nice experiences, well, yeah, again, that makes you really humble, that you have to cherish the good moments that you have together. I think it also when you can do it intentionally, like in Indonesia when they take down the temple, it's very different than when you don't have the choice. It makes me think when I was in Senegal, in Dakar, we went to the neighborhood of Jida Charoikau, which is located in well, basically in the center of the capital. And in the 1980s, people came there and settled there because there were like open spaces in the middle of the city. And well, they just went there because their crops failed due to a drought period in the country. And they didn't realize that they were settling the bottom of a lake. And when the rain started again, when the patterns restored, they were submerged basically. So when we are going through the area, we are showed around by, let's say, the first generation that settled there, an old man 65 something. And his house was basically submerged in mud 2 meters high. And he could recount all his memories and all the good times they had eating together with friends. And so it's gone. The memory is still there. But the sad thing is that he didn't have the choice of, he didn't really have the choice of leaving it behind. He would have liked to stay. So that makes me a little bit sad. Yeah, I don't know if it makes sense. But
yes, it does a lot. It does a lot, well, because this is what we faced also in other places with the floodings in Germany and China. So many people also lost their homes this year because of the floods simply took them away like a house of cards. So it was gone.
Yes, yeah. And if you imagine really when you finally succeed to make a home, and we established, I mean, that is something that takes a lot, and then to see it removed, gone in seconds, it's heartbreaking, I think.
Yes, it's heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking. Yeah, this is exactly what people experienced, and the stories are truly horrendous. So yeah, this is, we have to also read Mother Earth. We also have to read where should we build? Where can be a flooding, possible flooding? We like the river view, of course, or the ocean view, but this is now one of the areas where we might face some danger.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And on the other hand, when you succeed well, you have sometimes have these old buildings, even in the Netherlands, that are hundreds of years old, and you walk in streets that are also hundreds of years old, and when you walk there, you realize, okay, the stones are still standing, but you know there are so many generations of people that have gone through this and made their home there, but due to age, they had to leave this world, right? So that also makes me sometimes little realize, just when I'm standing against a wall and really taking that moment of taking it in, that, well, yeah, we're just visitors here.
We're just visitors. We are just visitors. I had that the other day. I was thinking about us as a shooting stars, and I realized we actually our lifespan is the moment the time we see the shooting star in the sky. Just that moment while the shooting star is lit up. This is actually our time on Earth.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Another topic that also inspired me to add architecture to the conversations on Mother Earth was another institution that I visited 4 years ago. I was invited to be a speaker by the CEO of European Sustainability Academy. Her name is Sharon Jackson. I mentioned this institution in the first episode because I met the first speaker that weekend on Crete in Greece. When I visited Isa back then, I realized that the whole building was built from natural materials right there where the building stood. So what happened was they took soil, the soil from where the building is going to be and baked it into bricks right there on the spot. And then they used, of course, this and straw and wood and all of this to create the building. And Sharon, of course, writes and talks about the health benefits of natural buildings that have no chemicals, have no lacks or colors that are bad for our health. So, Kria, what are your thoughts on constructing buildings from natural materials, and of course the affordability of this option?
Yeah, basically it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense to use what is available to you. As an architect, so it was not under Slumfighters yet, but with my studio Rosa, we were invited to make a design for a restaurant in the Andes in Peru. And there we applied a similar method of applying local mud with straw, and then I think it's at least in Peru they were just dried in the sun. They were not even baked. And it's really a beautiful material in the technical sense. You really have massive wall quality, so the sound of it is nice. But the walls also literally breathe, yeah, and they regulate the indoor air quality. And well, the air is so important. I mean, how often do you breathe?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and if it's all clean and natural, yeah, that's obviously fine. That's good for you. But if you have all these solvents gassing out from glues and from strange chemical compounds, that impacts you directly. But yeah, the affordability, that's another thing. Yeah, it's not only a matter of cost, because I mean the costs were very comparable. Also because it was at 3 kilometers high, it was kind of hard to reach, so it made sense to use the local materials and also the local labor, because basically the neighbors built this building. But what you notice in Peru is that usually, like regular local clients, they have an idea that this um, this technology is inferior, because they see in pictures and magazines, and if you go to the capital of Lima, everything is concrete and glass and very similar. Yeah, when you don't read the signs, it could be yeah, like
The other
a
city.
European or a metropolitan city. So people don't value the result as much as it would be with, let's say, the conventional material choice of reinforced concrete and so on. But I was lucky that my client was or still is a not-for-profit NGO in Peru, and they value that local labor and the local ecology sound materials. And also it fits their mission, because the restaurant is oversized, so they can use it to train the next generation of chefs and other restaurant related staff, like waiters and bartenders. And they are actually the young adults that they already gave shelter when they were still young kids living in the streets.
Interesting.
So this was a very compatible client architect project, and you need that. Yeah, so I can say as an architect, well, this is really the best way to go. But also in the Netherlands, when I was building that wooden house, people were a little bit suspicious, maybe even like, why wood? And that's not how we do it. I mean, yeah, you have to use bricks or concrete. Even going to the municipality, they would say, well, the technical qualities, and you have well documented proof that it works. And now it's realized it's great, but still there is this doubt that people say, well, isn't it still inferior to, well, let's say the way that we like to see it, or we used to see it. So yeah, I think that impacts the affordability on the value side, the benefit side.
Yeah. I remember seeing the pictures of that. That's a beautiful project you did. I remember you shared the photos. It's a few years back. I remember seeing that. That was really interesting. What's it's interesting also what you mentioned, and this is what we have to fight with when we also talk about the circular economy, because I teach that in my capacity as a university professor. The change of the mindset to value natural materials again, to see them as something that is good for our health and not chemical infested products that we normally buy just because everybody else bought them. This is what we have to overcome as well. This is a good point that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Everybody is doing it, so we have to do it as well, no matter how harmful it is for us.
Right. And what I find bizarre is actually how quickly we adapted concrete and so on, because at the start that was actually experimental, and we had a rich tradition. Even in a country like the Netherlands, we have a rich tradition of using local materials. But at a certain stage, we decided to go for, I don't know, fancy images and big promises.
Yeah. That's indeed the case. And now we have the highest construction industry is one of the highest polluters, even worse than the airline industry for regarding the emissions.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a lot of work ahead of us, actually, I believe, to overcome all that. But I think my listeners are curious about you now, and will want to know more about Slumfighters, because as you notice, my dear listeners, you see that architecture is way more than just designing and sketching a building in which we might live and work. And it gives us, fulfills our personal need for shelter. So, Kria, how can we support your work? How can we support Slumfighters International? How can we support those who are struggling to find shelter?
It's a difficult question at this moment directly for the organization Slumfighters. We are a little bit stuck in some projects, also because traveling is hard now, and also for example, the circumstances in Brazil are government-wise not favorable for let's say a harmonious and inclusive approach. But what you can do is basically take up our way of let's say looking at each other, instead of pointing the finger and blaming the other side of, well, but they are soiling our streets because, well, you know, all these prejudice about homeless people or people in slums. That's harmful, because when you approach somebody pointing a finger at them, you will poke them in the eye and you can never really get close. But also the other way around, because of all the hurt and trauma and bad experiences, they are also suspicious of the government and municipality. So basically you could help by investing your attention and start by listening and asking questions because you really want to know the answer, and then figure out if there's a way that you can connect it with, well, maybe somebody else who is also looking for a better world but doesn't know exactly how. And yeah, because we were forced to look closer to home, I'm also teaching here at the University of Applied Sciences in Almere, and here I'm also stimulating my students. And next period we start again with a project where I first friendly but forcefully get them out of the door of the academic building and send them into the neighborhoods where we are looking at how we can improve an existing neighborhood. And although it's not a slum, not by far, you will notice that by engaging and by listening, you find out that there are many challenges, let's say, or many opportunities for improvement, because there are also human beings. There are people who maybe lost a loved one, they're living alone, or maybe somebody's dealing with health issues, or somebody's, well, there can be a lot of things. And just by asking, hey, who are you, where are you from, and how can I help you, it will give you a lot of windows of opportunity to make somebody else's life better. And then the students come back and then they make projects that are still technically sound as we teach them, but they have a sense of connection, they have a reason why they are going to do something which they can really embrace with their whole heart, not just for the points, not just because it stands up, but because it makes sense.
Yes, and a project suddenly has a soul.
Yes. Yeah.
This is exactly what we also look in all the other art forms to find the soul inside of that. A beautiful, beautiful project. I'm glad you're doing that with students, because this is the next generation of leaders. You are influencing them for the rest of their lives, the next generation of architects designing other people's homes.
Yeah. And this maybe also when I started traveling a lot and engaging with all these people from Africa, from Asia, from Latin America. I think at a certain stage it became a pattern to me that once you get to know each other enough, you realize, hey, we are together. Basically, we are not the same, but we are together. And you don't have to travel far to have that experience. I mean, you can find it like with your next door neighbor, or somebody across the street, or somebody you meet, just somebody you didn't even know before. And to discover it time and time again, I mean, that's really fulfilling.
That sounds very fulfilling. I just tell my students, there's a quote by Mark Twain that I love so much, and it says, we are all the same on the inside. And this is what I like to tell my students. We are all the same on the inside. We are all in this together. There is no separation, because we have to resolve these problems, or what's the joy of life if we see other human beings suffering? Kria, you know I'm a big fan of your work, so I could go on listening to you for a very long time, but I have to conclude today's conversation. My listeners, you can find Kria on LinkedIn. He shares from time to time some of his works there. Where else can we find you?
Slumfighters.org has a website, and also my purely architectural practice has a website too. That's studiorosa.eu. I'm teaching here at the Windesheim University of Applied Sciences in Almere, which is close to Amsterdam. And this is the city which hosts the Floriade, like the World Expo. That's also recommended to visit, because very important themes for the future: circular building or circular economy and sustainable material use, but also connected with the social and affordable aspects of realizing something. So I'm enthusiastic that that's happening here in the city too.
Beautiful. It's wonderful. That is exactly what I want to bring to other places around the world. Exactly the issue of the circular economy. So wonderful. Thank you so much for taking your time today, Kria. Thank you so much for this very soulful, deep conversation today.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me. It's a joy also to talk like this and to listen and to share thoughts and to find out that we're on the other side of the world, but trying to reach very similar things. Nice.
So nice. This concludes today's conversation with Mother Earth, brought to you by Grounded Press. Next week's episode is interrelated with today's topic. I mentioned this earlier. This is the topic that is so important. We will talk about breath and health. We look forward to seeing you again. Stay tuned.